Good day everyone. I'm Angela, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, Preventing Sexual Orientation and Transgender ID Discrimination in Your Workplace. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Diane LD. Diane LD, President and founder of Advantage HR Consulting LLC, is a senior human resources professional with over 30 years of experience in HR arena. Diane holds a master's certificate in human resources from Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations and has attended SPHR, STEI, CPC, and SHRM, SCP certifications. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Diane.
Thank you, Angela. And I want to welcome and thank our participants for joining us. Let's begin our session by talking about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So does Title VII apply to all employers? Actually, it does not. Does Title VII protect only employees? And the answer to that is no. So what types of employment actions are protected under Title VII? Title VII was amended in June of 2020. And as a result of this amendment, making employment decisions based on an individual's sexual orientation or their transgender status violates Title VII and therefore is considered to be discrimination. Our employees are protected against sexual discrimination. We also need to understand the differences between sexual orientation discrimination and gender identity discrimination. So under the EEOC, how is sexual orientation defined? Sexual orientation discrimination refers to harassment or differential treatment based on someone's perceived or actual sexual orientation. And there are various forms of sexual orientation. So when we talk about sexual orientation discrimination, sex discrimination refers to treating a person less favorably due to their sex, sexual identity, or sexual orientation. There are a few historic Supreme Court cases that deal with discrimination based on sex. There was also an executive order, Order 13988, that was issued by President Biden on January 20th, 2021. This executive order expanded the prohibition of discrimination based on gender identity and or sexual orientation. With respect to transgender discrimination, this can take the form of an employer's failure to hire someone, demote someone, or even terminate someone because they're transgender. And I've listed on the slide here some examples of what constitutes transgender discrimination. So let's talk about transgender rights in the workplace. On this slide here, I've listed transitioning do's and don'ts for employers. With respect to gender identity, this is the personal sense of one's gender. So let's walk through some common gender expressions. So we're familiar with these terms. Role the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission plays in these types of cases. EEOC is the common term for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So here's an EEOC overview. They're an agency of the federal government, and they established Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So what is the EEOC's vision and mission? So what specifically does the EEOC do? So under the EEOC, we need to be aware of the two basic types of harassment. They're entitled quid pro quo and hostile work environment. Quid pro quo, which is translated to this for that. Hostile work environment describes a situation in which coworkers or supervisors engage in unwelcome sexually charged behavior that makes the workplace atmosphere intimidating, hostile, or offensive. So let's talk about hostile work environments. Proving that a hostile work environment exists can be complicated, and the burden to prove falls on the employee. So how can the employee go about proving that the hostile work environment actually exists? To prove that a hostile work environment exists, the employee must prove that the underlying acts were either severe and or pervasive. So how can the employer defend itself against a hostile work environment claim? There are legal requirements of a hostile work environment: unwarranted or inappropriate touching of another. So before the employee jumps to filing a claim with the EEOC or filing a lawsuit in federal court against the employer, the best course of action would be for that employee to put together a hostile work environment letter and present it to the employer. If you've decided you're going to file an EEOC charge, keep in mind the EEOC has a very well-defined process for handling these types of claims. Where can the employee file a claim? Well, as I mentioned, at the employee's local EEOC agency's office. So when filing a charge with the EEOC, there's certain pieces of information that the claimant will need to provide. This would include personal information, information about the employer, provide a short description of the alleged violation or violations, and the date or dates of when that discrimination or the alleged violations took place. So once the EEOC has all of that information, they will then look to see if they're going to proceed with the claim and how they'll proceed. And their investigation is going to depend on several factors. They're also going to look to see if there is sufficient evidence to move forward. Another topic that employers need to be fully versed in is retaliation. So what does retaliation encompass? It occurs when an employee has been discriminated against because they either filed a complaint against the employer. I also want to talk about the importance of effective documentation in these types of claims. And I get the question frequently, why do we have to document? Well, there's three reasons I can give you for that. The first one is that your documentation will protect the company. Secondly, it's the right thing to do for the employee. Thirdly, it can help provide future managers with a record if the current manager leaves the organization. Documentation also plays a vital role in investigations and lawsuits. So the bottom line is, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. When we're documenting, we want to be aware of these common documentation errors. So let's talk about how we can create an inclusive work environment. So let's talk about some best practices. I have compiled a list of frequently asked questions that will also give you some more insight as to creating inclusivity in your workplace. Could use of pronouns or names that are inconsistent with an individual's gender identity be considered harassment? Only when people feel totally authentic and connected with their organization can they achieve their full potential at work. Trans employees are no exception. Yet, unfortunately, few companies have succeeded in creating an inclusive work environment for people who don't identify with societal gender norms. So I hope that what I've laid out here today will help change that. Employers that get this right aren't just being savvy from a business standpoint. They're also crafting a corporate legacy, one in which human dignity is prioritized, and doing the right thing by their employees is regarded as fundamental to being successful. Thank you, Angela. I again would like to thank you all for participating in our webinar today. I hope you found the information that was presented to be informative and helpful. Should you have a question at a later date, my contact information is shown on the slide here. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Once again, thank you, Diane. That concludes the session for today. Thank you, everyone, for the participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Angela.